Myers. I am the Assistant Director of the Center on Disability and Inclusion and the Executive Director of the Tayshoff Center for Inclusive Higher Ed, faculty member in the School of Education. I'm so thrilled to be here today. I'm thrilled to be able to do the introductions. Just a couple of housekeeping reminders before I get started, and that is that we will be recording this presentation. So you should have gotten a little notification when you came in that the presentation was being recorded. Captions are available. You can enable them on your Zoom. To do so, find the transcript button at the bottom of the scene, select of the screen and select enable live transcript. So we do have live transcription turned on. And okay, I think that was my housekeeping. I want to thank all of you for coming. I know that it's the end of a busy work day, but I'm thrilled that you could be here to join us for part of our neurodiversity series at Syracuse University. And today we're really talking about tips and strategies for college success. I want to thank our team. We've got some fantastic people here. Dr. Christy Ashby, who is the director of the Center on Disability and Inclusion, Carly Grafassi, who is the manager of operations, the director of operations and communication for the Center on Disability and Inclusion, and does all of this very seamlessly, much more seamlessly than I can, clearly. Nate Hughes, one of our graduate assistants, doctoral student, and Goka Limeba, who is also a graduate assistant for our neurodiversity project. I'd also like to thank our donor, Karen Siebold, for all of the support that she's given us to be able to make this possible. I want to let everybody know just about a few things that we have coming up. Just to let you all know that as part of this series, we do Fridays hangs, social hangs, and the Disability Cultural Center from 3 to 5. And this week, I think we have a movie hang scheduled. So watch out for emails if you've signed up for our email list, or if you would like to, just let us know. We would love to have you join us for that. We have some students who are really interested in being part of the community and want to connect with other people. So that's really part of this neurodiversity project. So thanks for coming today. This workshop is really to think about how we support neurodivergent students and thinking about autistic students. Really, this is to talk about strategies for successful college experience, both from a faculty perspective, but also from the student perspective. Like what can students do to make their experience more successful in college, and what can we do to help support students at all levels? I'd like to introduce Dr. Scott Michael Robertson. He's an affiliated faculty member. Hooray, we are so lucky to have him with us at Syracuse, but he's now an affiliated faculty member with Syracuse University as a research professor in the Department of Public Health in the Falk College of Sport and Human Dynamics. He has a really wide range of experiences doing policy, social science. He's really an expert on accessible support services and technologies. He's a leader in neurodiversity and inclusion at school and work. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Scott Michael Robertson.
Thanks, Beth, for that wonderful introduction. Can you all hear me okay? Cool. So I'm glad to be here virtually connecting with you all. Maybe hopefully get to visit the SU campus maybe sometime down the line. And I wanted to say at the forefront that I love everything that you all are doing at SU. When I was some of what informs my work that I'll be sharing about tips and strategies that are informed by my professional experience, and it's also my personal experience as an autistic adult, and that informs a lot of what I've done in my career to enhance access, inclusion, and opportunity. And when I was in my undergrad and graduate studies, we didn't really have much. It's very little in terms of folks thinking about support. It was mainly still sort of the learning disability model. Basically, you got extended time on tests, and that's about it. And that's still true for a lot of schools now, but more and more schools like here at Syracuse and other universities and colleges have been thinking about how do we empower neurodivergent students and other students with disabilities to have better success and thrive on campus and just do well in classes and just perform well in terms of readiness for careers. So I'm glad to be able to share what guidance that I can help with this. And this, I wanted to make sure this is interactive today too, is that I have some slides, but you know, if you all have questions, we can do questions sort of in the middle. I don't have a megaton of slides. I just wanted to have enough to sort of frame the conversation and have some concrete, as I say, tips, strategies, tools, resources, suggestions that you all could consider when you're thinking about like your own access needs and supporting your inclusion and community integration at Syracuse University and throughout your life opportunities. And that includes, for instance, if you're doing internships, you know, other aspects, you know, are prepared, you know, work right now or preparing for long-term careers, or the rest of your lives as far as what it means to be living in the community, you know, again, on campus or off campus, other kind of aspects of life opportunities. And so my presentation today is titled Neurodiversity SU Tools, Tips, and Strategies for College Success. And I should say for accessibility purposes too, that my pronouns are he, him, himself, and his. And I am a white male autistic person with glasses, blue eyes, brown hair. I'm wearing, I guess it's like grayish type of shirt. I'm not really great with color processing, but I believe it's like a light grayish is sort of how you'd describe my shirt. And I have in the background sort of like a DCS sort of background where it's leaning out from the Lincoln Memorial out toward the Washington Monument. So just wanted to make sure you all had that for access purposes. And at the bottom of this slide, I also have the multicolored infinity symbol, which symbolizes neurodiversity and empowerment also often of neurodivergent folks, including sometimes it's used very actively, as some of you all may know, potentially in the autistic rights movement, which I've been a part of, and the neurodiversity rights movement has used this symbol also very actively for the past few decades. And then I also have a multicolored brain on the slide right here. I'm going to flip to the next slide. And my background, as was mentioned, is very diverse. I'm sort of multi-talented. That my degrees are originally in technology, so computer science undergrad at RPI, information sciences and technology PhD at Penn State, and master's degree in human computer interaction from Carnegie Mellon. So most of my degrees are, you know, my degrees are all in tech, and a lot of my earlier background is in tech, but a lot of my background is also in public policy, social sciences, health research and policy. Some of that's because of while I was doing my PhD and master studies, it shaped my interest also in that advocacy end, and the advocacy end cross-connected to like social science and health policy and for empowerment of people with disabilities. So now I sort of consider myself, you know, just able to sort of pick up anything on demand. I think I'm able to just read whatever, you know, journal articles or reports or whatever. And this is really helpful for my career. You might find for your own careers is that having that flexibility, I think, to learn new things throughout your life course with your studies here at Syracuse and in other places, that it can be really beneficial to have that flexibility in mind of if you study a particular major, just to open your eyes to other possibilities out there. And I think there's some stat that's, I think it's what, 70 or 80% of folks in their jobs are actually doing something a little bit different than actually what they originally majored in, either in their undergraduate studies or the graduate studies or both. So that's also pretty common. In addition to what was mentioned about my role as an affiliated research professor at Syracuse, and that's just started last summer, so it's just in the last several months, I also have achieved some impact for enhancing access opportunity, for instance, and quality of life for folks. And that includes, for instance, recently, I received the Henry Viscardi Achievement Award, which is for exemplary leaders in the global disability community. So you can see that I'm very passionate about empowering folks with disabilities, and my, including neurodivergent people, and my email address at the bottom is at Syracuse is srobber21@syracuse.edu if you want to email me, you know, in the middle or end, or, you know, whenever if you have any questions or comments or anything to share. And my picture is also on here. I usually like to have that on a slide just in case like video is not working or something like that. That's me pre-pandemic times at one point, you know, wearing a tie in person before we switched to doing things more remote. I know that you all in the higher education have been more in person for a while back with the pandemic, but a lot of us in the workplace, including myself, are still working very extensively remotely for sort of safety precautions with the pandemic. I don't know if I can move this a little to the bottom or something. Here we go. Make sure it's not in the way so they see it by my own size. So I wanted to outline the core objectives that I sort of had, learning objectives for sharing on this webinar. One of this is sort of framing my perspective on what it means for neurodiversity and neurodivergence, and commemorating National Autism Month, which is throughout this month of April, as some of you all may know. And then at the forefront, I wanted to share some resources. Usually I often wait till sort of the end to share books and things like that, but I wanted to spotlight them at the beginning, just to highlight that these are really, really key books that are available. And a number of them are actually either like free as PDFs, or they're relatively cost that you can, for instance, get on Amazon and other booksellers. I wanted to discuss strategies for socially engaging on campus and off. Again, some of this, what I'm going to be sharing as far as these tips, strategies, are informed by my professional experience, my lived experience as a fellow autistic person, so my own neurodivergence, and my collaboration work with many, many, many other allies, partners, collaborators throughout my career and throughout my life experience. Then I'm also going to describe some tools and tech that can help drive life activities and pursuits. Some of you all may be already doing some of this. Some of it may be things you haven't thought about to help remove barriers and support your own access needs, again, on campus, off campus, throughout your lives. And discuss approaches that can be helpful for challenges in areas like executive functioning and enhancing how we engage in supporting self-advocacy. And I have to the right on this slide a picture of engaging sort of in that collaboration, social kind of space. It's a lot of folks who are all collaborating together on a virtual platform like we're on like Zoom right now with a coffee cup next to it. So I tend to think very differently about neurodivergence and neurodiversity in society. I just wanted to frame that at the forefront, that if you read the history, if you haven't already, and I do invite you all to read the history of where we've come from, because it really helps to see where we are right now and where we're going toward for greater empowerment of neurodivergent folks in society, is that traditionally folks have thought of us as neurodivergent people, especially autistic people, but other folks, for instance, folks who have ADHD, dyslexia, learning disabilities, other sort of atypical ways of thinking, learning, perceiving the world, processing information as broken or defective, or just in need of fixing, if you will, that we had to become like everybody else kind of a thing, indistinguishable from our peers, if you will. That's traditionally what's been the model, this deficit model for many decades. But more emergent in the last couple of decades, few decades, I would say, is thinking more on this neurodiversity model for society, right? That we all human beings, right, have different ways of thinking, learning, and perceiving the world. And that neurodivergent folks especially are atypical in that, right? Like if we take IQ tests and we take other assessments, we are the outliers, for instance, on those tests, those assessments. And so I have a picture on this slide of folks with different sort of the multicolored brains and diverse ways of life, because in addition to our diversity of our neurodivergence, what it means for supporting neurodiversity in school, work, community living, we also bring different other facets of our lives that are intersect with our disability lived experience, right? Like our race, our ethnicity, our gender identity, sexual orientation, economic status, for veterans, so a lot of other facets in terms of our human lived experience. And I also highlight on here, for instance, in the case of autism, and you could apply this also to other aspects of neurodivergence, that autism, and this comes from a shirt that I have, it's not a processing error, it's a different operating system. And I emphasize red, we often in the autistic rights movement, neurodiversity movement, have emphasized red for spotlighting things during National Autism Acceptance Month here in April. And that helps connote sort of this paradigm again of, a different way of thinking, being, perceiving the world, just like, for instance, a Mac computer, Windows computer running Linux, et cetera, right? Like we are just running a different way of processing the world. And I hope you all have had opportunities to learn about that and may have future opportunities to learn about that, including with your connection to the resources there at Syracuse. Other things in your life you may seek out, for instance, online to learn more about and maybe join in, seek out maybe leadership opportunities in this neurodiversity movement, in the movement to empower fellow folks who are neurodivergent in society. And especially during this month of April, as I say, we are commemorating National Autism Month throughout this month. It traditionally was thought of as National Autism Awareness Month, but we are striving to go beyond just simple awareness and to move toward acceptance in this month and commemorate the diversity of lived experience, what it means to be autistic people and other aspects of related neurodivergence, and celebrate our accomplishments in school, so K to 12, in higher education, so college and university life, in the workplace, community living, and removing barriers that can hinder full success in life and enhancing our quality of life throughout our life course. And related to that, I have images at the bottom of the slide about, again, the diversity, for instance, of autistic people from diverse races, ages, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, economic status, embodying, right, that it's a very heterogeneous population. Obviously, folks who are neurodivergent is a very broad set of us in terms of folks in society. And then autistic people alone, even at about 2% of what we think we are of the general population, it's very wide-ranging in terms of diversity across that lived experience, right, in terms of backgrounds. And this is also embodied with the image next to that of a multicolored A, which symbolizes not only diversity of autistic people, but the fact of that intersectionality, for instance, with the LGBTQIA+ community, which often has a higher rate for autistic people, especially transgender. I've read some recent research that suggests up to potentially 8 to 10% of autistic people identify as transgender. So much higher rate than you find among non-autistic people, right? So our intersectionality even looks different than for non-autistic people. And that's something that we want to embrace and promote and celebrate during this month of April. I just want to stop for a sec. Do we have any, I guess we don't have, there are things in the chat. Did anybody, have folks posted anything yet? No? Okay.
Not yet. No questions yet. But if
Okay.
anybody wants to put questions into the chat, I'm happy to help moderate those.
Yeah, or jump in auditorily if you wanna, come off mute and you just want to share something or ask a question, you can feel free to do so. But the chat, as I say, also works just as fine. Different ways of interaction and contributing anything you all might want to share. And I want to emphasize different resources that are available. Again, I wanted to spotlight this at the forefront because I think sometimes folks, they come to like webinars and talks, and I'm no different, where they're like, oh, this is great information. This is like this whole viewpoint and perspectives on tips and all that. But what also, like, where can I learn more about these things, right? And I don't want to wait till all the way at the end, like we're not getting it because of questions or whatever. So that's why I put this a little bit earlier to just mention briefly here some of these books and resources that have been developed by, for instance, the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. So I am one of the 2 original co-founders of ASN. Ari and I co-founded it in 2006, actually. Believe it or not, coming to Syracuse was one of our early conferences, actually, that the Disabled and Proud conferences that were held in, I believe it was what, 2010 or 2011, maybe? It was a long while back. We visited, at least I visited for one of and some of my colleagues visited for one of the conferences there. And I was the founding vice president. And that was one of my entry points to the movement. And obviously ASN has flourished since then. It just commemorated its 15th anniversary as an organization in terms of systems change, engagement, empowerment of autistic people and other folks with disabilities. And for those not familiar, ASN is an organization run by and for autistic people. Again, supporting that empowerment, autistic people, other folks with disabilities. So one of the resources that was released by ASN is actually a guide for college, Navigating College, a handbook on self-advocacy. That is one of the resources, for instance, that's available as a free PDF online. You can download it, or you can get it as a book on Amazon or other bookstores. Most of these, if you buy it, for instance, on Amazon or other sites online, and it's not that expensive. I think a lot of these books are maybe like $10 or $20. Another one that's related for that college experience is called Empowering Leadership, a systems change guide for autistic college students and those with other disabilities. So for instance, in addition to supporting your access needs right now for your college experience, if you're thinking about maybe honing or developing your leadership skills, your advocacy skills, I think that book would be especially helpful. It was developed for something that I was gonna mention later on in the slides, for a leadership institute that ASN actually runs every summer. This specifically for autistic college students. It's competitive, and students from around the country actually apply to participate in that leadership institute, which traditionally has been held here in the DC area or Baltimore, but for the last couple of years, they've hosted it virtually because of the pandemic. Another couple of resources are Welcome to the Autistic Community. If you're potentially newer to your autism diagnosis, or maybe other folks are, as well as the Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network, AWN, has a welcome packet for folks who are newer to that lived experience as autistic people who are women or identify as non-binary. Loud Hands, Autistic People Speaking, and Straight On to Morning Essays on Autism Acceptance are, if you are interested in reading essays, narratives from fellow autistic people and other folks who have that lived experience on neurodivergence, what it's meant for empowerment, driving systems change in the past couple of decades. The second book, actually, the reason why it's titled And Straight On to Morning, if you remember from either your childhood or you've read, seen any movies recently, watched any books, that is a reference directly to Peter Pan, because of the fact that historically, folks have thought of autistic people as just being kids, that a lot of resources, focus, spotlight drops off after we, I don't know, turn 8, 10, 12 years old, right? Even adolescence, yet alone in terms of the focus on adults, that it's like we never grow up, we're just perpetual children. That's been changing a lot, I'd say, in the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years, but we still have a ways to go on that pathway towards supporting the full life course. And then includes resources, for instance, on what we're doing for research dollars, for instance, in autism research for empowerment, again, in college and employment and access to healthcare and just like access to participate fully in our community life and, support engagement when we're experiencing barriers to, making friendships growing up and things like that. We have a ways to go to get better supports in that area, but we've made a lot of strides. And then another book that I have on here is An Autistic View of Employment. If you are working right now, or you might be seeking employment later on, internships, co-ops, permanent employment, then that book may be especially helpful in terms of the tips and strategies that it has on seeking out accommodations for work, ensuring your work success, thinking of other possibilities in your career path, and navigating challenges and barriers that may come up as you go throughout that workplace experience, which can be, it can be very, I know for me, especially when I was in my undergrad and grad studies, it was very nerve-wracking at times in terms of especially permanent employment, but even internships at times as far as going for interviews and navigating like that social experience, for instance, of the workplace. So I think the books like that Autistic View of Employment are very helpful for that. And I have on the slide a multicolored infinity symbol again, and then if I remember right, your Carnegie Library at Syracuse. I hope I got the picture right for that. There was someone also who just, another chat, it just went up to 4. Did someone post anything in chat?
Not yet, only Carly saying, please feel free to post your comments or questions.
And you know what, Scott, somebody has asked if you are able to share this PowerPoint afterwards. I wasn't sure if you wanted to share resources or just the PowerPoint.
I can share the entire PowerPoint, and you'll be able to click when you access the PowerPoint, you'll be able to click on those links to bring you up directly to the pages on there where you can either in some cases find the book as a PDF, or in some cases it's only available, for instance, as a book on like Amazon or whatever, but you'll be able to go directly from there to be able to either download or purchase the books. I don't know, you might even I don't know whether you share them or not. I don't know if you might even have some of these resources potentially either downloaded or in print, perhaps maybe even already at SU.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm going to keep going on the slides. Wait, why is that not? Oh, there it goes. Okay. I thought it was a clicker for a second there. And what I highlighted earlier too is, again, that Autism Campus Inclusion Summer Leadership Academy, which is this National Summer Institute for diverse college students who identify as autistic people. It's been held annually since 2012. So I was one of the persons at ASN who helped develop that National Leadership Institute, if you will, in the summer week-long Summer Leadership Academy. I played a lead role in writing the grant proposals that we had from different funders to support the development of that institute. And when I say institute, I mean from the from the learning perspective type of a thing, not institute like as we see in the disability community in terms of being segregated from community living. I mean institute in the sense of your professional development on leadership for a week long, where you hear from speakers who are experts, for instance, in advocacy, leadership, system change. I believe most, if not all, of the speakers in many cases are autistic people, certainly at least allies. And again, it's students have participated in that, undergraduate and graduate students for a while. So there's 173 college students thus far have participated in ACI since it started. So I want to encourage you all to consider that opportunity for applying for it. I think we're past maybe the deadline for this year, but so you may want to consider it for next year. I think we are. I'll have to double check on that. I know it's always held in June. I don't remember exactly when their deadline usually is for the spring. And the ACI logo, Autism Campus Inclusion, is at the bottom of the slide. So I want to shift now to talking about specific strategies to support, for instance, social engagement on campus. And again, when I'm talking about these tips, strategies, and things you may want to consider, I'm thinking from my professional expertise in terms of like inclusive living, community living, inclusive higher education, and my own lived experience and experiences I've seen from other folks as far as my friends and colleagues who are autistic people, other folks who are neurodivergent. And one of the tips I want to highlight at the forefront is taking that downtime for your energy levels, if you're not already, before or after you socially engage on campus and other settings, right? We all have limited resource units, if you will, for our own engagement in activities. And that includes for our academic studies, for, if you're in the workplace, for your work, for, extracurricular pursuits. And depending on, how we're feeling as far as like maybe our mental health, our stress, things that just happened recently in life, that may affect our energy levels, which we often, in the disability rights movement, sometimes we've called this spoon theory. And the idea is that on a given, for instance, day, week, you may start out with sort of a limited number, if you will, of spoons, if you will, your resource units. And those can be depleted by, the activities you have throughout the day, especially maybe challenging circumstances. For instance, if you have experience that's extremely sensory or cognitively overloading, you might run out of spoons, for instance, quicker than at other times. So consider yourself from that empowerment perspective. And it's come up, for instance, in my career recently, where sometimes some of these neurodiversity support programs in schools or workplaces, sometimes they add like a lot of other social activities. And it's great, it's wonderful to have that connection. But sometimes I've also emphasized to folks, check in, do a check-in with your students or your workers or your interns, just to make sure like it's not too heavy. Sometimes maybe folks just, they just want to get through their studies or their engagement, and then they need downtime, they're tired. So you need that balance point sometimes for thinking about your own resource units. So it's something that comes with time. If you're not used to checking your own self with that, it's something you can, figure out with practice. Connecting with fellow neurodivergent people and allies on campus and other online settings. So that includes social media, Facebook. I guess you all probably use what? Instagram, maybe more, TikTok. I know that social media, Twitter has been sort of in flux Snapchat, I guess. What's the other one? Oh, what is it? WhatsApp? I'm not a great expert on all the four, but I know there's a lot of other aspects of social media. So, connecting with folks not only just at SU, but in other settings to just meet, a lot of other fellow neurodivergent people and allies. I can't emphasize that enough, that it helps a lot with your own empowerment to meet other folks who share either that lived experience or similar lived experience to support empowerment. Seeking advice and guidance from your mentors, faculty, staff, students, family, and friends. And that includes bouncing things like questions and concerns off folks. I do that all the time, where I'm in a social situation and maybe I'm not sure if it went right, maybe afterwards, or maybe like I'll text or call, family, my mentors, and be like, did I handle that right? What do was that the right way to approach? Because I have that uncertainty kind of at times. Sometimes there's these things that are especially subtle on social engagement, in work and other settings are challenging at times. And that helps, I think, on that self-advocacy perspective, is to, connect with others, that while we are experts on our own life experiences, sometimes it just helps to get some guidance and support from others, and to practice doing that, you will find will be really helpful often for success in life. Joining clubs and activities maybe that match your key interests, and also readying for challenges that might come up, especially if you're interacting with folks who may be less familiar with neurodivergent folks, and you might need to sometimes educate them on neurodivergence. So I think your experiences may vary with that. I really hope, and I imagine you may have a lot more better experience in terms of what it means for that social culture experience at SU, for instance, than some other schools that are not as progressive, I think, in thinking about diversity, different ways in terms of interaction, et cetera, across the campus. But, sometimes challenges can happen. And that's, again, also where connecting in with your mentors, faculty and staff, et cetera, if you have challenges, seek guidance, seek some help if some difficult situations come up, and find out, ways to handle things where maybe some significant challenge happened and you're not exactly certain about, to deal with it. And so it's not just like in your coursework and, academic activities, but these other aspects of college life. And also consider, efforts to lead efforts to improve access and opportunity on campus. Maybe there in Syracuse, itself, in terms of you're navigating around the city, maybe in New York State, nationally, internationally, there's a lot of opportunities out there, not just in disability rights, civil rights, but just different ways to engage in volunteering, engaging ways to empower other folks that really will be helpful. And I recommend, it's very enjoyable for life pursuits. And it's really helpful for readiness, preparation for employment too. When you're thinking about transition to work, is the leadership skills you develop. Leadership skills, communication, collaboration. Employers really delight in terms of the enhancement, engagement in those skills, and taking the initiative. Even if they are skills where you're like, oh, that leadership opportunity was a little bit different from my major, that's okay. It's those general leadership skills, ways of that you're trying out new things, engagement with things, directing things, collaborating on things, that's really, really helpful for yourself as far as your life course, as far as through your career, and for engaging in community life and sort of enhancing your own life experience. And I have on this slide also, again, that multicolored brain on silhouettes of folks, one looking inward and one person looking outward. And I also want to share some strategies for tools and tech to enhance sort of life activities. That includes, for instance, fidget and stimming aids to drive life engagement. I think I have, let's see if I happen to have in my pocket here. Uh-oh, did we have a challenge?
You're back.
We all were muted a second ago.
You're back. Sorry.
Okay. I wanted to share, as far as for instance, for things that can help as far as stress management and for that energy levels, it's very popular for us to use like fidget and stimming aids. So if you're not already, I do encourage this as something to consider. So for instance, I've got a picture of like stress balls, for instance, at the bottom of the slide. I also use, and I find these, for instance, like online on places like Amazon. I don't know if I can, let me see if I can close it up. There we go. There's a little bit of a marble in here. You can actually push it back and forth. They're very cheap. You get them in different colors, you know, green, red, blue, etc. I think it's like $10 for 12 of them. I don't know. It's not expensive, and they don't make any noise, and you can just carry them everywhere. And they originally honestly were built for kids, but they work just as well for adults and teens. And one of the nice things, especially for me, I have a habit sometimes of breaking things. It's a challenge I've had sort of lifelong, and like these are almost indestructible. They are sewn on the ends, so like you can, you know, squeeze them, etc. You know, put knots. You can put in you carry in your pocket, your backpack, or whatever, and they'll be just fine. So I carry them around everywhere I go. Pre-pandemic, I was using them in workplace. Now I use them at home, or go about, you know, wherever I'm going, if I'm on the subway or whatever. I always have them with me, and just being able to take them out of my pocket, and maybe left hand, right hand, or both hands, being able to just do that, and it helps that my engagement on things when I'm stressed out, or you know, that social engagement kind of thing, to have that in my hand while I'm, for instance, interacting with folks. Low tech, for instance, sensory tools that could be, for instance, sunglasses. I guess I said this low tech. I guess noise canceling headphones, I guess, could be considered higher tech because they're electronic. So maybe I had a misnomer a little bit slightly on that. But like thinking of different sensory aids, for instance, on supporting your sort of sensory regulation, and you know, different things you might have, for instance, maybe like an app on a you know, smartphone or tablet. I have a white noise app on my iPhone that makes lots of different things in terms of, you know, raindrops or like ocean sounds, or you know, lots of different types of noise or whatever, to sort of, if it's needed, to like drown out, for instance, like other background noises. Or I also use it, for instance, sometimes to help me with sleeping too, is if they're if like I need that, like especially like if I'm trips or something like that, there are other noises maybe in the background, just to have that constant sort of regularity in terms of like the calming notion, for instance, of ocean waves or whatever, to help me with that rhythm, for instance, for sleeping. Productivity and planning apps and portals. So for instance, there are different apps you can get, again, for your smartphone or tablet or computer, like for instance, to-do apps like Todoist or Promoter or Notion, things that support, for instance, developing habits and routines and structure, like Habita. For instance, platforms that help with like project management, like Zoho or Smartsheet or Trello. So a lot of different resources out there. Some of these things are free, some of these things are paid, some of these things are a combination where maybe the light version is free and then the premium version is paid. There are apps, if you're not already using them, for, you know, enhancing studying and note-taking, like Anki, and for doing like flashcards, like GoodNotes and Evernote and Notion for helping take it down, like notes in class, or for other things where you may want to keep reminders. It's good also preparation also for the workplace too, is that, for instance, if I go on like job interviews, I will take very detailed notes and have them in the note-taking app, for instance, like on my iPad, and have it at the ready, so I don't have to just rely on my own memory, that I have it actually right down there in print, and I can consult my notes as needed while I'm connecting with the interview for the employer, to make sure I'm a lot more successful in my performance on that interview. And then communication apps, especially if you experience any language or communication challenges, maybe when you're stressed. A lot of us are, what I would say is very frequently part-time basis, use what's called augmented alternative communication, or AAC. Some folks are full-time users as well. And that includes, for instance, you know, typing to communicate. There are apps again on smartphones, tablet, computer, where you can be typing. Some of them also, for instance, have pictures on there, drawings, like different ways in terms of that visual and written communication. And it helps sometimes, for instance, myself, is that I sometimes, you know, when I'm stressed out, like the language doesn't come as well sometimes when I'm speaking, and just some of that written processing might be a little bit easier in that. So that's something you might want to consider for yourself too, is if your communication means, especially when you're not doing as well at times. If you're, you know, stressed out or anxious or feeling maybe sensory or cognitively kind of overloaded, from something that happened, in class or otherwise on campus or otherwise in your life. And, maybe sometimes engaging in, for instance, that written communication, for instance, can be more helpful. And I also wanted to share the tools and tips for enhancing executive functioning. So I don't know, have you all talked about executive functioning maybe a little bit at SU already? Is that activities that support our problem solving, organization, planning. So it's one of the greater challenges I know that I have as an autistic person is that's been a difficulty like since childhood all the way through undergrad and grad school and my career. And while I've gotten better in some areas of it, I'm, what's the best way to say it? A work in progress, I think. So I still sometimes have difficulties and navigate through those difficulties. And one of the ways that helps me with my executive functioning is enhancing, like developing like routines, habits, and structure to make my life a little bit less chaotic at times. So maybe you consider different routines and habits for your own life. Do you like to study in the morning? Do you like to study in the evening? Like what works for you as far as different patterns for your life and that regularity? And you'll find if you put in that regularity, that consistency, it'll help you with thriving a lot more, like in your classes, again, extracurricular activities, internships, et cetera. And maybe you can get some guidance again from SU faculty, staff, like others on how to develop, routines, habits. Family and friends may be helpful for this as well. Breaking down what could be large, overwhelming, projects and tests, smaller chunks. Smaller is better, easier. Sometimes we have a tendency, I know I have a tendency to just handle everything at once. You have this huge project coming up in 3 weeks and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to do it all at once, right? But to put it down and chunk into a lot smaller pieces and steps can make it feel a lot less overwhelming from the problem solving executive functioning standpoint, is to handle just a little bit of piece at a time until you get to the end. And then it feels a lot more manageable. And so that's something that you have to be intentional though. Like you want to be intentional with your planning and problem solving on how to break things down into smaller pieces and start at the beginning too, right? Like it's a lot harder to break things into pieces if, for instance, your project is due in a day or two, right? Versus if it was assigned, say, if it's not for 3 weeks from now, you have a little bit more time. So learning on the fly, that at the forefront, sometimes starting earlier to break things down, to decrease your anxiety when you're thinking about organizing and planning and problem solving for your, class projects, tasks, and activities, and, things for workplace too. Maybe setting goals and planning, adjusting, and monitoring those goals for your coursework and extracurriculars that you could maybe have, for instance, every semester. Or you all, refresh my memory, we are in the semester system I've not taught a class there. Okay. So every semester for your coursework and extracurricular activities. And that's, again, something that comes with practice and habits for having goals for coursework and extracurricular activities. And then as well, exploring creative accommodations and supports and considering maybe hosting brainstorming sessions on ideas for executive functioning. What can be helpful for supports and accommodations, you may find, you find on the fly, or someone else is like, oh, I do this, you should try that out too, right? I mean, that's originally where I learned a little bit more about what I should be doing regularly, for instance, with these stimming aids. When I travel and fly, like I didn't know, for instance, when I go on airplanes that you have a right as a person with a disability on the Air Care Access Act to ask to board early. That is a reasonable accommodation on that. And I used to be so stressed out that I would always be boarding, I'd be in the 5th unit or whatever, in terms of 5th group or whatever. And I'd always be worried about it, like so crowded plane, et cetera. Now, in, I don't know what, the last 5 or 10 years when I fly, I always board early, and it's a win-win, in terms of it decreases my anxiety. It's like, I'm not like socially bumping into folks or whatever, because I'm trying to navigate like that cabin space kind of thing. So it's a good example where I was talking to a mentor at one point and he's like, yeah, why don't you just always request to board early? And I do that every time now out of habit. And it's very straightforward. Like it doesn't cost me anything like money wise or anything on supports or whatever, but it had a large win-win for that, my ability to fly and be a little bit less anxious, because it's already nerve-wracking going through airports, as you all may or may not have, you may have experienced in your life, airports tend to be not often very neurodivergent friendly with the sort of buzzing sensory experience, information overload, et cetera. So at least if you can help decrease a little anxiety in some cases can be helpful. And then at the bottom of the slide, I have for that creativity brainstorming like a light bulb symbolizing that, and sort of like sticky notes across the board, sort of showing like different ideas for thinking about ways to creatively and flexibly support your executive functioning, enhance your ability to sort of problem solve, organize, plan things in a way that makes sense for you, right? That's individualized for what works for you to be successful, since we all are different and what can be helpful for, our planning and organizing, problem solving, just like we approach other things like social engagement individually very differently. And my last thing to share is about self-advocacy, which can come in time. I want to emphasize striving to learn deeply about your own strengths, talents, challenges, and barriers. That's a lot about self-advocacy, is learning about your own self. It's harder to advocate for yourself if you don't learn deeply about, what is your own gifts, talents, strengths, but also challenges and barriers that might come with your disability, other aspects of your life experience. And then practice different ways to advocate, on campus, off campus, for your access needs, what you need to be successful, what supports and accommodations to help you thrive. And that includes, for instance, disability-related accommodations there in college and the workplace. Some of you all may have had that experience, for instance, from high school, middle school, elementary school, which gives you a leg up, I think, for higher education. A lot of other folks did not have that self-advocacy experience or that scaffolding, that structure and support to be empowered for self-advocacy in K-12. So it's a little bit of a newer experience, right, when you're coming to college or graduate school. And so that's something to think actively about. And again, talk to other neurodivergent folks, talk to faculty and staff about, what you should be doing, how often you should be practicing your self-advocacy, different ways to be thinking about it, again, in your coursework, your accommodations requesting. When you encounter barriers, what can you seek out, in housing, other aspects of campus life that maybe reduce that barrier on the fly to make sure you can participate actively. Again, it's all about your access needs to be equally successful in, campus life and then life across your career and your whole community living experience. And learning your rights, including rights as a person with a disability, and seeking out resources that you have there at Syracuse University, in New York State, and nationwide. The different disability rights laws, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Rehabilitation Act. When I met, there are other niche laws, for instance, like Fair Housing Act, Air Care Access Act. I do encourage folks, when you're able to learn actively sort of the big picture on these laws and what rights you have as folks with disabilities, federally. And then, as I say, for instance, New York State, for instance, has its own rights, its own laws for access rights for people with disabilities. And I have pictures at the bottom of the slide for sort of navigating your journey. And then it's April, so sort of like the Easter Bunny type of a thing. And it was a little after the Easter Bunny, I guess, would have come here at night here in Washington, D.C. that I took of bunnies that happened to be jumping around. I guess the iPhone 12 is so good at, even with these night shots, that it looks almost slightly like late daylight or whatever, even though that was taken like at midnight. So I wanted to shift to, if we do have questions. I know there's a couple of messages in chat, and I don't know if we didn't yet have any, if you wanted to ask a question, Beth or Christy or someone else.
Sure. Thank you so much. This was really fantastic, and you are such a wealth of information. I took a lot of notes, so I really appreciate this, and hopefully there are some great bits that were really helpful for everybody on this call. So first I wanted to say thank you. Thank you so much for all of this. And also thank you for your longtime advocacy. One of the reasons we brought you in here is because, first of all, we really love your presentation and what you have to say and your lived experience, but also we're so appreciative of the advocacy work that you've done for just about decades now. So we're really thrilled to have you here, and how lucky that we have you now at Syracuse.
Thanks.
So there are a few comments actually,
yeah,
that that are in the chat. But anyone can feel free to either use the hand raise function, add your comment into the chat, or just wave at us, raise your hand in some other way, whatever would be most helpful. But I'll read a few comments that are here. TJ says, for audio sensitive people, I recently got some Loop brand noise canceling earplugs, which are very helpful and discreet.
Yeah, I concur with that. Noise canceling headphones, definitely thumbs up for that. Can't emphasize that enough for those of us with audio sensitivities, and especially if you have challenges, for instance, with filtering noise when it can be loud. And you'll have what, 20,000? Is it 20,000 students? I remember, like, Syracuse has a lot of students, right? Undergrad and grad students. So
yeah, something like, I don't know, 15,000 undergrads and 22,000 total, something along those lines.
Something along the line. So it can get very noisy. And then, I can relate to that. For instance, currently at work, pre-pandemic, the building that I work in, for instance, at work has I think 5,000 or 6,000 folks. So not quite as big as SU, but almost like a mini town in itself, sort of in the building. So there's a lot of experiences where, like, just carrying around those noise canceling headphones, just having them on the fly, to just expect that environments may be noisy and sort of be at the ready, and then be ready to educate folks too, right? Sometimes when they see big headphones, like, people are confused at times, right? We're still moving toward that motion in terms of folks understanding that a lot of us have noise sensitivities and may need our headphones for that. But yeah, thanks for that. What was the name again you mentioned?
It was TJ, and actually
TJ.
looks like TJ has a question or is raising.
Yes. Yeah,
raising
go ahead,
their
TJ.
hand.
Yeah, so hi everybody, I'm TJ. My pronouns are he, him, and those adjacent. So the particular reason that I mentioned that is because previously, like, I'm personally, like, I'm not able to afford, like, actual, like, larger over-ear noise canceling headphones. But I found these Loop headphones. They literally they fit on my keyring, and they're like the size of a quarter in there. And there are other brands that do things like this, but, like, literally have earplugs that are, smaller than most, like, Bluetooth earpieces as well. So the big, there are definitely great like noise canceling headphones that also serve the function of playing music, but they can be a couple $100s. So I definitely encourage people to look into smaller ones. They have ones that look like just normal earbuds for listening to music that you can fit in your pocket. And I've worn those. I wore those to a wedding. I've worn them also in an airport, and they're hugely helpful.
Yeah, TJ, also related to that too. Yes, the expense can be a lot too. Although there are ways sometimes creatively to figure that out. I didn't get mine actually until I got them as, like, a holiday present. So it was one of my Christmas presents several years ago from my parents. But I also find, in addition to the expense, that sometimes the bigger ones can get very hot in the summer in terms of the pads. So I have like the smaller in-ear ones or whatever, which, as you say, are also often cheaper too. Like, sometimes one of the smaller ear ones that I've bought sometimes is only what is it, like $15 or $20 or whatever, and they're just the little in-ear ones, so they're not the whole pad type of thing, so they're not as uncomfortable in terms of that sweatiness that can happen for, like, in the summer or whatever, when it's 90 degrees out, when you have the pads or whatever. Sometimes it can be a little more uncomfortable outside with the big bigger noise canceling ones. But yeah, that's a great suggestion also as far as cost effectiveness, because sometimes the balance point is that sometimes you have to be creative or flexible in terms of options for some of these things, in terms of what works for you as far as like budgets and things like that, for resources there for assistive technology. Thanks, TJ. There was another comment.
TJ, thank you for sharing your experience. We have a few more comments. Christy says, we're grateful for your advocacy and the work of ASAN. Judy says, thank you for your presentation. Your information is great. Shayna says, thank you so much for this presentation. I think we're just about out of time. We might have time for one more question or comment, if anyone has anything they want to say.
And I could also stay a few minutes after if needed to, if folks have.
Okay.
Dustin?
Yeah, hi. So I'm a teaching assistant and I'm planning on going into academia, and this has all been really helpful. I try to use universal design in my courses. Of course, that has its limits and its critiques, but I'm wondering, what would you recommend to a faculty member about what can we do to have our classrooms be seen as accessible for neurodivergent people? If there's something we could have in the syllabus, like I always talk about the disability center and that type of thing. But what would you recommend?
So thanks, Dustin. I am a big fan of universal design and universal design for learning. It's actually something hoping to maybe with collaboration as affiliated faculty with SU for long-term is find different ways to explore in research practices, et cetera, how we can bolster it even further as far as things like that are good practices. So yeah, thumbs up for the universal design for learning. I think also having that flexibility, for instance, if you're a teaching assistant, if you're faculty, to having that willingness to sort of learn and think outside the box type of thing, that flexibility goes miles, I think, to think about different supports and individualize for each person. So you want to think of the broader group too. So that's where universal design for learning comes into play. But also, if you have a student to like maybe has challenges you haven't seen before, is again, yeah, to reach out to folks who have that disability expertise on campus. There's a national center that's funded also by the U.S. Department of Education too, which I believe is still running. I forget the acronym offhand. I can get folks that info afterwards that for college students with disabilities, that might be helpful as well. Connecting with other faculty on campus, having that collaborative atmosphere, I think, and just put things out honestly, just be like, I'm wondering what you might recommend or seen out there for accommodations to help out with like this challenge, right? Like it's more of the challenge or barrier than necessarily like the disability itself, as much as like what solutions can work for these difficulties that are happening, or how can you accelerate more of this good thing that's happening, right? Like, what is this support going to be doing to magnify what's already happening that I've seen? Oh, this is working wonderfully. How can I accelerate that even more? In my class, and I think talking actively also with neurodivergent people too. I can't emphasize that enough. There also are, for instance, now that we have online means so much, you can even go on social media, ask an autistic person, for instance, I believe is the hashtag on social media on for instance, on Twitter, a lot of opportunities for that, Facebook, etc. A lot of resources online on that. Some of the books that are recommended to, you may find things, even though they're written it for the perspective of the neurodivergent college students, especially autistic people, but and other folks with neurodivergence, but you may also find stuff in there that might be helpful for teaching classes as well when supporting that full access and inclusion. And that just learning actively, I think, as you're teaching it, and to think when you're thinking about PowerPoint or lessons or materials, think of that forefront for access needs, right? And to maybe create your own guidebook, if you will, maybe a little mini type of a thing that's maybe like a couple pages long or a few pages, it doesn't have to be that long, that you can dynamically sort of change on the fly, that is the things that you consider when you're creating resources, right? That you can consult, that maybe is, checklists or bullet points or little narratives for yourself of, oh, I should check this to make sure that like the sensory accessibility is good, et cetera. So that'll help with folks on the broader sense. On the individual sense, as I say, is like, get to know that person and see what may work for them, and then connect again with the disability access specialists, on campus, including there at the School of Education, on different things that folks have done as far as, strategies, tips, and accommodations and supports that have helped folks be successful. TJ, you also had your hand up.
Yes, this is more like also towards Dustin in response to that. In relation to my experience so far this semester particularly, I would say, just to second what Scott said about reaching out to the students themselves, because I mean, my personal experience is that our Center for Disability Resources is very well equipped and they are very helpful, but it was also difficult for them to kind of cater to my needs, like not knowing the direct like coursework and everything. So I would say that you, as someone who's a little bit more involved with the course itself, have a pretty awesome opportunity to like reach out to these students or like to communicate with them, because sometimes it can be very, I'm sure, you know, everybody here is aware of how difficult it can be as the student to self-advocate. So I think probably the most direct tool to help with that is to kind of foster that relationship.
And in line with that, TJ, I also think too is when reaching out to emphasize that it's about empowerment and like supports for success, et cetera, like that, I think it decreases anxiety for the student that you're, you know, this is collaborative, you're in there to like empower the success, right? Like this is not like fixing something that's wrong, you know, this is like helping them, you know, perform even better, right? Like in their studies, et cetera, like to, in terms of like supporting like their full success. Because I think sometimes maybe a little bit reticent sometimes on the students kind of end if they're like worried, oh, like there's something I did wrong or whatever, right? Like it's from that confidence then is often an issue. I just also wanted to mention briefly, I'm hoping this is something that I can help encourage with collaborators at some point. We also need something nationally that's really lacking, is we need a national organization for neurodivergent students and allies to in higher education. I think we need, you know, organization where it would be, and if we were to create such organizations, that would also be helpful for you maybe in the upcoming future, if, where you all as STAs or faculty could reach out there too, and that can sort of be a national source as far as info that's focused, targeted specifically to higher education for undergrad and, you know, and grad school, as far as empowering folks who are neurodivergent and allies as far as success, like in class, in their extracurricular activities and other aspects of that full campus life, community life sort of engagement for success, and just having a good experience, like in the case of SU, at SU, right? Like you want to have, you're only in undergrad for often for 4 or 5, you know, 6 years. You're in grad school for a fixed period of time, and you want to enjoy that experience, right? Have a great life opportunity. And then, as I say, ready for your career, ready for your life pathway as it takes you. So the more success you can have, the better. And you know, I also appreciate Dustin, you just even are thinking on that empowerment aspect too. I mean, and something that I hope you can rub off on a lot of other TAs and faculty members too, in terms of the ways they can support you know, empowerment and going above and beyond on the success of their neurodivergent students, you know, and other students with disabilities, and, you know, helping to remove barriers to success, which is really important.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody for coming. We're just about out of time, or we went a little bit over, so a few people had to leave already, but Scott, I can't thank you enough for all of your work, for this terrific presentation. Thanks everyone for coming today, for participating, for your attention, for your questions. If you're interested in connecting with us, please reach out to the Center on Disability and Inclusion. If you're interested in knowing more about the Neurodiversity at SU project, we're happy to share information. If you'd like to participate in some of our research, we're always interested in having the neurodiverse and autistic perspectives in all of our work. And that's, you know, foundational for everything that we do. So thank you so much for joining us. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Scott. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks for being here, everybody. Have a great evening.
Have a good evening. Thanks you all for having me speaking, and thanks for the wonderful comments before I jump off here too, in terms of it seems like a lot of folks enjoyed it and said it was fantastic, etc. I really appreciate that. It's a lovely, it's always wonderful to hear the positive feedback, and I look forward to future collaboration engagement also too, and in future months, you know, down the line, as far as on not only the neurodivergent end but other aspects in terms of you all, you know, I don't know if some folks take it for granted, as you have a wonderful, you know, I should say you have a wonderful university. I'm now part of it now too, as an affiliated faculty member.
That's
but
right.
I love everything at SU. So thanks you all.